Today's episode has been brought to you by Offering Tree. Big news, Connected Yoga teachers. As you just heard, today's episode is thanks to Offering Tree. They are our new podcast sponsor, and we are thrilled. Because of their support, this podcast that you are listening to right now is free for your ears. So if you have a moment to reach out to them, tag them on Instagram or Facebook, or email them, or send them a telegram by pigeon, any way that you can say thank you for supporting the podcast and bringing it to you would be so appreciated. Hello and welcome to the Connected Yoga Teacher Podcast, which was created for you so that each and every week you are connected to the information and inspiration that will support you as you build your yoga business. Because I remember what it was like to walk out of my 200-hour yoga teacher training and feel like, oh gosh, that wasn't enough time to learn everything I wanted to know to be able to teach yoga. And as many of you know, we're always learning as yoga teachers. I'm still learning. And now we get to do that together here while you are doing things in your busy life. And I am here sharing interviews like today's with you. If you are out and about doing things like walking, or if you're at your house cleaning, or maybe you're prepping your yoga space, whatever it is that you're busy doing, I love when you send me photos, either in a private message if you don't want to share it with the world, or tag me on Instagram or Facebook and tell me what are you doing as you're listening to today's episode. And also tell me what you think or what questions you have. I love to hear from you. Now, for our brand new listeners, in case you don't know who I am, I'm your host, Shannon Crow. I use she, her pronouns. And I share a random fact about me if I can think of one on each and every podcast. Today's random fact is that as a child, I wanted to become a veterinarian. I had all of the books with what is that veterinarian that wrote all of those books? Oh my gosh, let me think of it. I had to go look it up. It's James Herriot. So I read all of his books as I was growing up. Each and every one of them that I could get my hands on. I just loved his books. And I actually went to college to become a veterinary technician. So I am a registered veterinary technician. It's kind of like the difference between a nurse and a doctor. So I did that for quite a while. I worked at various vet clinics. My absolute favorite was working with large animal vet clinics, specifically Twin County Vet Services, which is now closed. And I loved working in an office for the connections that I made, not only with the veterinarians and the other office admin staff that I worked with, but also I have such a soft spot for farmers and people who are really taking care of the land and animals who live on the land. And I definitely love that about my job. So shout out to all of our farmers who are feeding people. Shout out to all of those of you who grew up on a farm or are connected with farms in any way. It's definitely a special group of people in my heart. Also, I live on Turtle Island, which I grew up calling North America. And if you look at a map right now today and you see where Toronto is, I'm 3 hours north of that, on what's called the Bruce Peninsula in Ontario, Canada. And this is Anishinaabe, Odawa, and Mississauga land. And I am trying to learn more and more about the Indigenous people who were taking care of the land long before my ancestors arrived. I'm also a mom of 3, a yoga teacher, podcaster, and founder of Pelvic Health Professionals. Speaking of pelvic health professionals, if you want to dive in and learn more how you can help your yoga students who have a pelvis, yep, that's probably all of them, we have some really great calls coming up. Actually, today, if you're listening to this episode in real time, we're going to learn about sexual trauma with Diane Liska, who offers yoga-informed psychotherapy. In February, we're going to learn about the hypopressive technique with Trista Zinn. We've had a podcast with Trista talking about that already. I can link to that in our show notes. And then in March, we're going to learn from Mary about how to look at the research and how to know if the research we're looking at is actually accurate and really break that down. And then in April, we'll talk with Lori Walker-Krause about pediatric pelvic health. Not to worry if you're listening to this and those dates are over. There are replays of every single call we've ever done in the library. If you'd like to learn more about any of these topics, join us over at pelvichealthprofessionals.com. Now, if you hang out on Instagram or TikTok, you might have seen some really fun reels or videos sharing useful, quote-unquote, legal hacks by our guest today, Erika Kullberg. We have her on the podcast today for more than 30 seconds for sure, and a lot of information. So we can really learn from her about how we can legally protect our yoga business and what 3 must-have legal agreements do we need to put in place. Erika Kullberg is the founder of Plug & Law, a company that provides online businesses and entrepreneurs affordable legal services, and an award-winning attorney who has been featured in publications like CNBC, U.S. News and World Report, Business Insider, and The Washington Post. She has years of experience in corporate law and represented Fortune 500 companies prior to founding Plug & Law. Today, she shares useful tips, tricks, and hacks online to help people make more money and save more money, and has over 6 million followers across Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. In our interview, Erika talks about 3 things you need to have on your website: your privacy policy, terms and conditions, and a disclaimer, and why they're so important and the details that you need to know about them. We also discuss how to protect your intellectual property through trademarks, copyrights, and patents, as well as some things to take note of when you're signing contracts, such as non-compete and non-solicitation clauses. And the great part is how Erika shares all of this legal information, because I know it's not the most fun to listen to this, but Erika does this in a way that's easy to understand and apply to your yoga business. So this is a super helpful episode for anyone who's been wondering about the legal aspects of running a yoga business. And what I also love is that Erika talks about how to make this very affordable, because she knows what it's like to run your own small business. Now, before we get into the episode, I want to tell you some big news. So I told you at the top of the episode that Offering Tree is sponsoring today's podcast episode. And if you don't know what Offering Tree is, I want to tell you some of the features that they offer specifically to yoga teachers, especially to those of you who have both online and in-person offerings, or one or the other, just online offerings or just in-person offerings. So if you have training and events, classes, appointments that you want to book with people, connection calls, courses, or workshops, I know that you are looking at how can I offer these online at some point. And most likely you're doing that via Zoom. So it's amazing. And I can't wait to tell you that Offering Tree has this. With just one click, your students can sign up and get the Zoom link automatically. That means that you do not need to be emailing your students or checking and worrying if the link that you sent them is the right one. The Offering Tree software does that for you. And if your yoga offerings are happening in person, not online, it's just as easy. With Offering Tree, your clients, your students know where and when they need to be when they book. If you want to check out what this looks like, we offered a workshop with Tristan Katz on conscious marketing. I'll make sure to link to it in the show notes so that you can check and see what is it like when you go to sign up for something through Offering Tree. Also, if you decide to use this software, we have a discount code for you. I love to make sure that we can get you a discount code. Go to offeringtree.com/Shannon to get that, and we'll also link to it in our show notes. Alrighty, let's dive in and learn all that we need to know for having our legal agreements in place, and the 3 that we really have to focus on first. Welcome to the Connected Yoga Teacher podcast, Erika. It's so great to have you here today.
Thank you so much, Shannon. It's a pleasure.
I'm excited that we get to dive in and talk about some things that maybe aren't the most exciting things for some yoga teachers, but are definitely necessary for a yoga business and especially an online yoga business. But before we do that, tell us, what is the work that you do and who do you do it for?
Oh, I love that question. So, I'm a corporate lawyer by background. I graduated from Georgetown Law and followed the traditional path of going to a big law firm. And then a little over a year and a half ago, I decided that I wanted to leave the law firm to, instead of helping these Fortune 500 CEOs, help actual entrepreneurs and small business owners. So I left the law firm. I started a company called Plug and Law. And then at the same time, I decided to build my own online presence. So I started a YouTube channel at the same time. So now I kind of wear two hats, one as a content creator and then one as the founder of this legal company.
I love that you actually moved your business online so you know what what it's been like for a lot of our yoga teacher listeners who moved online during the pandemic.
Yeah, having an online business is amazing because of the flexibility it allows you. But obviously there are different considerations being online that you just have to make sure you're protecting yourself.
Amazing. And for our listeners, because I think this is such a cool story, tell us what you and your husband just did with your latest move.
So we have decided to officially become digital nomads. So I was living in Tokyo for the past 4.5 years, and we packed up everything. We reduced our life to 2 suitcases each, and now are planning on traveling the world. So we're starting off in Sweden. I was in Barcelona last weekend. In 10 days, we'll be in the US for a bit. So we're kind of living out of these few suitcases and trying to explore the different cultures and explore the world while we can, because we figure maybe in a few years we'll want to have kids and settle down. So now is the perfect time to do something adventurous like this.
That is really exciting. So let's dive right in, because our yoga teachers have a lot of questions around LLCs, trademarks, contracts. Our yoga teachers talk about non-compete, non-solicitation clauses. And I sort of feel like not many people are asking about terms and conditions and privacy policy. So let's actually start there. What is the terms and conditions document or the privacy policy document, and why do we need those?
Sure. Perfect question. So the basic overview that how I structure this is, if you are an online business, if you have a website, there are 3 legal agreements you have to protect yourself and your business and to comply with these various laws and regulations. So going down the list, the first one is called a privacy policy. And that's probably a term that most people at this point are familiar with. The second one is called terms and conditions. Sometimes you'll hear them called terms of use. And the third one is a disclaimer. And they all serve different purposes, but the overarching theme is to protect you and your business and to comply with laws and regulations. So going into the first one, this is the privacy policy. So that is not only essential for your website, but it's also required by law. So your website visitors need and have the right to know how their information is being collected and used, and then what rights they have with respect to how their information is used and processed. So the non-legal speak way of saying this is a privacy policy. As you know, when you go on a website, maybe you're collecting their email address. Maybe you have a lead magnet, or maybe they're entering their email address and their name to book a yoga session with you. Whatever it is, if you're collecting personal information in any way, you have to have a privacy policy that just states how you're using that information, who you're sharing it with, and all of these other things. So that is the first one, a privacy policy. And another thing to keep in mind is that you want it to comply with these various laws and regulations. Some of them out there that you've heard of, maybe the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, and the California Consumer Privacy Act, CCPA. And it has to specify how you're collecting and using the data. And so that is the first one, the privacy policy. The second one is called the terms and conditions, again, terms of use. And terms and conditions, you can think of them as governing the rules of your website. So they're going to say things like What is your refund or exchange policy? Maybe if you're doing online yoga classes, what is your no-show policy? If you're no-show, do you still pay? And it's going to just lay out the rules about the products that you're selling, the services you're offering, and even things like how legal disputes arising out of use of your website or the services and products you're offering through your website, how are those legal disputes going to be resolved? What law is it going to be governed by? Is it going to be governed by New York law, California law? And so these terms and conditions are going to lay out all of these rules for your website so that there's no ambiguity. If, for example, using the simple one of if someone is a no-show to your yoga class, how is that going to work? Do they need to cancel 72 hours in advance in order to get a full refund? All of those terms are going to be in the terms and conditions. And then the third one is called a disclaimer. And a disclaimer basically states what you are and are not responsible for. So an example, if you have a yoga website and you are putting, top 5 yoga moves, or as you can tell, like I haven't practiced yoga in a while, so I might sound silly, but if you have a blog post about yoga moves or yoga positions, I guess the word is, the disclaimer is going to may state that you are not responsible if someone follows your yoga tips and gets injured. So it's really creating this line between what you are and are not responsible for. The disclaimer is also going to do other things. Like, for instance, if you have affiliate links in your post, a disclaimer will state that, hey, we have affiliate links. We may receive a commission if you click on these links. Or if you have testimonials, the disclaimer might include something about testimonials, how these are all real past clients I've had, et cetera, et cetera. So those are the 3 combined that you'll want on your website. It's the privacy policy, the terms and conditions, and disclaimer. And as far as where you place them, you're going to place them right typically in the footer of your website. And so you'll create generally 3 different pages, and you'll hyperlink the terms and conditions. You'll hyperlink that to go to the terms and conditions page. You'll hyperlink the privacy policy to go to the privacy policy page, and so on and so forth. So that's the general overview.
That's so helpful. And what it really highlights for me right away is when you were talking about the refund policy. This is so important to have in place before someone contacts you or doesn't show up for a class. All of a sudden, someone might say, well, I couldn't make it to class. I want a refund back. And to have in there how that's going to work and really think it through. Like you said, you can have 72 hours. Some of our yoga teachers will have a booking software that will help them with this, but they also need to have that in their terms and conditions. So the way I look at it is it's to take care of our yoga students as well as ourselves. And I didn't think about or know about the disclaimer. So I'm so glad to hear that. We can add that one as well. Is there anything that you see online businesses where you think, oh gosh, I don't think this person knows about this with regards to those 3 documents?
So I think one of the mistakes people make is they think that they can copy and paste someone else's terms and conditions and copy and paste them onto their website. That's a big one because that is copyright infringement. It's illegal. You can't do that. That's a big one. Another one is just trying to write them on your own. I think that becoming a Google lawyer is probably not what you want to do with your profession, just trying to Google lawyer and figure out what these terms should say. So I think just being careful that, these documents are ultimately in place to protect yourself, but it also, as you were mentioning, it's a good signal to your customers that, for example, for the privacy policy, it signals that you care about their privacy and that you're a legitimate business. A lot of customers now, they know that if you go to Coca-Cola's website, if you go to Nike's website, they're going to have that privacy policy. So it's a signal of the legitimacy and establishment of the business. So I think it just, in addition to helping protect you, it signals to your customers that you are a legitimate business. And so it's good to have for those reasons. And I would be careful not to be copying and pasting someone else's terms and conditions onto your website.
And so I'm also excited because you have templates that our yoga teachers can use. So can you talk to us about those templates and how they work?
Sure, of course. So when I created Plugin Law, my goal was I was really tired of other lawyers overcharging, especially I was thinking for small business owners. As a small business owner now myself, like you don't have that much money at the beginning to be spending thousands of dollars on lawyers. So I wanted to create a solution that was at an affordable price point and someone could get it and feel protected. And so I created something called the legal bundle that includes all three of these templates that you need. It includes the privacy policy, the terms and conditions, and the disclaimer. And then it just comes with color coded instructions. So you download them instantly. It takes most people about 15 minutes to just go through the color coded instructions. It's going to say, here, place your company name, here, place your URL. And then you can just get those uploaded onto your website. So just makes the process fast, 15 minutes max.
I had a look at these last night as I was getting set up and ready for our interview today. And I was really impressed with how simple it is. You've got the instructions really laid out well. And like you said, things are highlighted and people can go in there and create their own. And then do we need to get those checked over by a lawyer, or are they just good to go then?
Yeah. So what we like to say is templates are not foolproof because we cannot provide legal advice to you. We don't understand about your specific situation. For the majority of people, the templates are going to work just fine. But if you're concerned, if you want that extra level of security, of course, you're free to go to a lawyer and have them specifically look at the templates and maybe add on something that's customized to you and your business. But I would say for the majority of people, the majority of new business owners, the templates will be a great starting point and certainly better than not having anything at all.
Right. I've seen some people get really creative with their terms and conditions and privacy policy in terms of the wording, where it's worded a little more less legal language, more clearer language. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, ultimately, this legal language, the legalese, I think lawyers invented it to make the legal stuff seem more intimidating for non-lawyers and therefore command higher fees. So our templates, we've had people message us and say, wow, this was super easy to read. Like I actually understood what these terms and conditions say. So to create these templates, by the way, it's I think 28 pages of templates that we've created for you for the terms and conditions, privacy policy, and disclaimer. We've had people just say that like it's super easy to read. My team of lawyers, we have really smart people on my team, people from Harvard Law School. We've worked to make this really comprehensive and easy to read for yourself as the business owner and also for your customers because they need to know what they're agreeing to when they're coming to your website.
In terms of updating these three documents, if someone signs up for your templates, do they get notified if those get updated, or how does that work? Or how often should we update those three documents on our website?
Sure. So one of the upgrades that we have is called legal agreement upgrades or something, where every time we have to update it, we'll send you the updated version. But generally, you should just keep an eye on your terms and conditions and privacy policy once a year, I would say, and just make sure everything's up to date. And obviously, if laws change, you want to make sure that you're updating them to reflect those laws. And then at the top of your terms and conditions and privacy policy, you want to have just a statement that says last updated on and then the date so that you can keep track of that. And then your customers are aware of when those policies were last updated.
Okay, that's so handy. This is one of those things, connected yoga teachers, that you can put on your calendar. Let's check in, because I've done this. I've gone back to look at terms and conditions. I'm like, oh, we've updated things this this is out of date. So that's good to know.
Yeah. And make sure you keep a folder in your Google Drive or wherever of every single version of your updated terms and conditions and privacy policy. Because you want to know that, this is the version that I had in October of 2019. This is what I had in September of 2020. So every time you're updating them, even if they're minor changes, just keep a log of that. I think that would be very helpful.
Oh my gosh, I never thought of that. That makes total sense in case someone's reaching back, like reaching out to you for something that was a while ago. Okay. So handy. What about then? We get a lot of questions from our US-based yoga teachers about LLCs. This doesn't apply to us as Canadians. And we have done another podcast on LLCs, but just a general, how do we know when we need an LLC? What is it? How does it protect us?
Sure. That's a great question. So I would say in the US, the two most common structures, one is a sole proprietorship. And a sole proprietorship, this isn't actually a separate business entity. If you're doing any business activities but don't register as any kind of business, then you're automatically considered to be a sole proprietorship. So you'll report any income from the business on your personal tax return. And then the second popular one, as you alluded to, is called the LLC, which stands for Limited Liability Company. And this is actually a separate business entity. And so the main difference between just operating without any business entity versus operating with, let's say, an LLC is that it separates your business assets and liabilities from your personal assets and liabilities. So let's just say as a sole proprietor, if you form a sole proprietorship, if someone gets hurt, let's say doing a yoga pose that you put them in, they could come after you. They could sue you and come after your personal assets, your car, maybe your house. If you have a separate business entity, so if you have a limited liability company, those assets are separated. So if your company gets sued, typically people can only come after your business assets and liabilities. They can't come after your personal house, your personal car, your personal bank account, only the business bank account, for example. So that's one of the big things that you have to consider is how do you want this separation of the business versus personal? Another thing I love is the tax benefits that come with having an LLC. So one of the biggest tax deductions you can exploit is the home deduction. That means you can save money on utilities and maintenance. Another thing, you can write off all of your marketing and advertising expenses in the same year that you spent them. You can write off expenses for items like computers and office furnishings. And you can deduct up to, I think, 50% of the cost of meals consumed during times of business entertainment and personal development. So these are just some ideas. Obviously, speak to your accountant about them. I am not an accountant, but just some things that you can deduct when you have a business.
Okay, that's really a good thing to look into. And I'll make sure that we link to our other episodes on insurance, accounting, and we have one other one on legal considerations and questions to ask. One other thing that our connected yoga teachers ask about a lot is non-compete and non-solicitation clauses. This was happening before COVID, when there were more in-person classes. We were hearing yoga studios telling teachers, you cannot teach within this radius. Even though those teachers are contract, there's been a lot of discussion around it. And now that yoga teachers are moving online, I hear the same thing happening. Or yoga studios are afraid that yoga teachers will, form their own business, or yoga teachers are concerned that the yoga studio now owns their videos and stuff. So what are some considerations that we might have around this?
Sure. So let's break down the non-compete and non-solicitation for those who may not be familiar with the legal terms. So a non-compete, like Shannon mentioned, would be saying that, okay, if you work for our studio, you can't work for any studios within a 5-mile, 20-mile radius for the next 2 years. That's an example of a non-compete. A non-solicitation means that you can't solicit people. So it could mean that you cannot solicit existing yoga teachers at that studio, or it could mean that you can't solicit any of their customers. So you can't then take their customers and make them your clients. So those are the two common ones probably you'll see a lot. The thing I'll say is just make sure when you are signing an agreement, you understand every single word because these are legally binding. And if you don't understand what you're signing, you could end up in a position where, okay, it actually contained a non-compete that prevents you for 2 years from getting business from this area. So you just want to understand and closely read what you're signing. And also remember that everything is negotiable. If you're not happy with the terms that they want you to sign, push back on them. Maybe for the non-compete, say, look, 1 year is or 2 years is too long. Let's make this 6 months. Or maybe, 30-mile radius is too big. Let's make this a 2-mile radius. Or instead of just being so broad like that, why don't you say to them, perhaps, please specify the exact studios you do not want me to work with that you define as your competitors. So these things, I think the combination of really understanding what you're signing and then two, understanding that, yes, you are in a position of power, you can push back. Those will really help you from entering into an agreement that really maybe was not fair to you or prevents you from flourishing in your business.
I agree. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on, often when yoga teachers come to me about this, I remind them, you're a contract worker. It would be like a carpenter coming into the studio, and I could be wrong, so feel free to let me know if you have other thoughts. If a carpenter comes into the studio and let's say builds something or fixes the floor or whatever, there's no way that the studio is getting him to sign, him or her or them, to sign a non-compete clause saying you cannot work at any other place around here because this person owns their own business. And yet we see yoga studios doing this to teachers over and over again, where I know what it's like to have to work at multiple locations to create a full-time income. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, again, I would just say if you're not happy with the terms, you should push back on them and know that you are in a position of power. And the worst thing that they can say is no, but at least you're trying, because once you enter into the agreement, it's too late probably to have conversations like that. But prior to signing, that's when you have when you're in the greatest position of power to speak up about that. And yeah, I mean, not legal advice, but I do think that's unfair if you can't make a full income from one studio and one studio is making you sign a non-compete.
Yeah. The non-solicitation, I see both sides clear with this one. Like I know what it's like. I managed a yoga studio. We never got our teachers to sign a non-compete. The non-solicitation, there's a one of our limbs of yoga is asteya, non-stealing. And I think it depends. If a yoga teacher goes and says, hey, come to my classes over here at this other place, but they're in this studio, there's something that just doesn't feel right about that. Like I was very careful when I was teaching in studio to talk to people about my upcoming classes in that studio whenever possible and not to really pull them away to other studios, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. I don't have a personal opinion on this one. I think whatever both parties agree to is fine.
You're right. It's so good. This is an agreement. And I love how you said, like, really look it over and it's negotiable. That's great. What about when we create something like a course or a PDF and we hold it really dear to us and we don't want someone to take it and steal it and create something that's so similar or actually take that thing and go and sell it somewhere else? How can we protect ourselves with that?
I think, as always, just having the proper agreements in place. So if you have students, making sure that they're signing an agreement that says that, this course, this is your intellectual property. You cannot copy parts of it or in part or in whole. I think just having those in place. But I will say that this is a very common problem of people in the online space stealing each other's content. And so in addition to having the contracts in place, you also need to police it, meaning that if you notice that someone's doing it, you should send them perhaps a cease and desist and say, like, look, this is not okay, to protect your intellectual property that way. And we can talk about, so intellectual property, there's copyrights, there's patents, and there's trademarks. So if you want to, we can talk about the different kinds, what it means, because most people don't really know the difference.
Yeah, please define those for us.
Okay, so here's the best way to think of copyrights, patents, and trademarks. So copyrights protect creative works in fixed forms, like movies or songs, or your course that, you have the curriculum. This is your video of you talking about these yoga poses. So easy ones are, think of a Taylor Swift song also, or a novel like Gone Girl. These are copyrighted, and copyright exists the moment the work is created. You can register it, that's voluntary, but the moment the work is created, it's protected. Patents, those patents protect inventions. And there are two types of patents. The first is a utility patent, which protects how something is used and works. The second is a design patent, which protects how something looks. And, the patent example is, if you watch Shark Tank, you always see people proudly displaying their patents on the show. And then a trademark may be a word or logo that helps consumers to identify the source of a product or service. So this could be the name of your company, or the logo your company uses, or your podcast name is a trademark, or your YouTube channel name. And if you're a course creator, a trademark could be the name of your course, or it could be the name of a signature method that you use in your course. Or it can be a phrase or slogan. The common one everyone knows is just do it. Typically, when I say just do it, people automatically associate that with a certain company called Nike, because that's a very strong trademark that they have. And so an example of how you would encounter a trademark, a patent, and a copyright in the same store is, let's say you go to McDonald's, and right before you enter, you'll notice that big M outside of the store, right? And that M outside of the restaurant, those golden arches, you can immediately recognize those as the source of McDonald's restaurant services. So that M is a trademark. Now you walk in, you order a Happy Meal. The Happy Meal comes with a book. That book is copyrighted. And then let's say you order their delicious French fries. Perhaps the machine that makes those French fries, that particular crispiness, that machine might be patented. So in one store, you encounter the patent, the copyright, and the trademark.
Oh, right. Okay, that's so helpful. What about, so one of our teachers was asking about specifically around creating a curriculum for a yoga teacher training and not wanting. So you're saying as soon as they write that, it's copyrighted, because there is this, I don't know if it's a myth or if it's a real thing, but some people say, like, mail it to yourself and then you have a postmark date in this letter. Is that a thing?
I've heard that too. I mean, anything that you can do to prove when you've created it, I think that's very helpful. But yes, copyrights exist the moment the work is created. And when you'd have to prove it, it's of course great to have proof that shows that, okay, I created it on September 8th before you stole it on October 8th.
Right. Okay. And what about the trademark then? Like, for example, I was thinking about this recently. I have a membership called Pelvic Health Professionals. Should I be looking at trademarking that name? Can I? And if I was going to, how do I do that?
So trademarks, to get federal protection, so across all 50 states, you have to register a trademark. And you'll do that through the United States Patent and Trademark Office. And it comes with a lot of benefits. I mean, the first is that it does add incredible brand value to your company. If you think of Apple brand, if you think of McDonald's brand, the brand value in part comes from the fact that they own those words, they own those trademarks. And again, it gives you broad protection across all 50 states. It allows you to sue in federal court if you believe your trademark is being infringed upon. And then you will be the owner. Once it's registered, if and when it's registered, you'll own it. So you get to use the restricted symbol with your trademark, which is the little R with the circle around it that you see. And you'll get a certificate that says this is your trademark. So, it's hard for me to answer when you should trademark your logo or your company name, because that's going to depend on the business owner. But generally, if it is something that's very important to your brand, it's best to register your trademark earlier rather than later. Because kind of one of the worst things is you don't want the headache of having to rebrand your company that you've worked so hard for. So let's say if someone else sends you a cease and desist and says, stop using it, and you have to rebrand, that's a huge headache because you've spent so much time and effort and money building your brand. So I think just the peace of mind that comes with registering your trademark and knowing that you own that trademark is very beneficial, great for a lot of small business owners.
Do you know then? So we would just maybe search this. I'm thinking of in Canada, I would search like Canada trademark, how to apply or something like that. And is this different than, because I've registered my business name here in Canada, is that different than trademarking?
Yeah, so it's different from registering your business name. So if you, let's say, register your LLC name as Erika Kullberg LLC, I don't then automatically own the federal trademark to Erika Kullberg. So those are separate things. And a lot of people, that's a great question because I get it a lot. A lot of people think that, okay, I have the business name, so that means I have the trademark too, but that's not the case for federal trademarks.
It'd be something if somebody came after you and said, no, I own your name now. You can't use it.
I mean, Joe Rogan, the famous podcaster, he has trademarked his name, I've heard.
Really? I don't know if I want to follow if you get that example now. All right. Is there anything else that you can think of with online businesses that you wish people knew about in terms of legal considerations?
I think just generally, my advice is always for the legal things. I know that it is not the most glamorous thing. Like it's more fun to think about your branding and, the marketing. Like legal is perhaps on the bottom of everyone's to-do list, but I do encourage you to at least take a look at the documents they need for your website. Like take a look at intellectual property. Do you want to register a trademark? Because for a lot of these things, especially when I'm thinking about like having the right contracts in place, it's better to get it just done now and have that peace of mind than wait till it's too late. Like I get so many people saying, so-and-so is suing me or I'm in this legal dispute. And I'm like, well, did you have the proper contracts in place? They're like, no. And so I think it's just better to, even if you are just starting out, it's better to have those protections in place in case of those worst case scenarios. And I'm not saying that every small business owner is going to end up in legal trouble or get sued or whatever it is, but I think just the peace of mind is worth it, even though it's not a glamorous thing on your to-do list. Just try to get it done.
That's right. It goes along with our taxes and having our accounting in place and our insurance. I think it's super important. And once we have those, we have that peace of mind. I think you also have, so you have the terms and condition, privacy policy and disclaimer package, but do you also have something for the LLC and trademark?
We do. So for the LLC, we have what's called the business formation bundle. So we will actually do all of the work for you to form your LLC, to get your tax ID number, which is called an EIN. You'll get your business bank account, or we'll connect you to our partners who will get your business bank account. And so it's all in one done for you. So that's the LLC business formation bundle. And then for the trademark, if you'd like to register your federal trademark, we can actually help you submit that trademark application. So that is called the trademark bundle. And it includes the actual e-filing of your trademark application with the United States Patent and Trademark Office, and then customer service from us, and then also what's called a direct hit search. So we're just making sure that no one already has registered the exact same trademark, because if that's the case, maybe you'll want to be aware of those results so you can decide if you want to submit it or not. So we also just conduct that search for you.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing all of this today. How can our listeners find out more? What's your website? And also, I feel like I haven't checked out your YouTube channel, but I need to go and do that. So tell us how we can connect with you.
Sure. So for Plug and Law, you can go to Plug and Law. That's plugandlaw.com/Shannon. And that's going to take you to the page that shows you all three products that we talked about: the LLC bundle, the legal bundle, which contains the terms and conditions and privacy policy and disclaimer, and then also the trademark bundle. And then if you want to check me out on YouTube, I think I am at 190,000 subscribers now for my YouTube channel. I talk about personal finance. It's completely unrelated to law, but I'm just really passionate about talking about money and making it less taboo for women, especially to start thinking about finances and investing and how you're going to build your wealth and then what you're going to do with this wealth. So that channel is just my name. It's Erika Kullberg, ErikaKullberg.
That's amazing. We'll link to those in the show notes. And just thank you so much for all of your answers today, for your time, and for sharing all of this with our Connected Yoga teachers.
Thank you so much, Shannon. I'm a huge fan, and it was an absolute pleasure to be on this.
Connected Yoga teachers, I'm popping in here real quick because Erika and I just got chatting when I asked about going to see some websites that just say like terms and conditions and privacy policy, and I only see those two links. And I was asking, is the disclaimer missing? And Erika, do you want to share what your thoughts are on that?
Sure. So this is just personal preference. So some people prefer to have just two hyperlinks, the terms and conditions and privacy policy. And then some people like the three separated out, the terms and conditions, privacy policy, and disclaimer. So typically, if you only see two, that means that they've combined their terms and conditions and disclaimer into the terms and conditions hyperlink. So the privacy policies always has to be a standalone document. That hyperlink has to say something like privacy, or it has to say privacy policy. But the terms and conditions and disclaimer, if you prefer fewer hyperlinks in the footer of your website, just for aesthetic purposes or whatever, then you can just combine the terms and conditions and disclaimer together in one page.
So helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, Erika, for your time in this episode. I learned so much. I appreciate that you have created these templates to make it so much easier for our yoga teachers and all online business owners to have the proper documents in place. So thank you so much for all of this help that you've offered to us. Also, Connected Yoga teachers, I want to say that Erika called out her YouTube when we recorded this, but now she's at 246,000 subscribers as of today when I'm recording this. And thank you to Crunch for saying that she follows Erika on Instagram and sees that she has 1 million followers on Instagram and 5.5 million on TikTok. So wherever you hang out online, whether it's YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, you can definitely follow Erika and give her a shout out when you listen to today's episode. I also would love to hear from you. What is your next step here? Which legal agreement could you work on this week? If you just focus on one thing, or maybe it's your accounting or your insurance or another legal thing that you want to get in place. So if you were to only choose one, let us know what that one is. You can post it in our Facebook group, the Connected Yoga Teacher Facebook group, or you can share it in the comments part of the show notes page. That's over at theconnectedyogateacher.com/254. And if you have questions that weren't answered in this podcast, we will continue to create podcasts and find experts based on your amazing questions. That's our goal over here. We want to help you and support you as much as possible. And I also want to thank you for being here today, all the way towards the end of today's episode. It means a lot that you've spent your time here learning together, connecting, and really investing in your own yoga business, but also supporting the podcast. I want to give a special shout out of gratitude to Denise Bell, who sent over this audio clip. Let's have a listen to what Denise said.
Hi, Shannon. This is Denise Bell. I just wanted to reach out and tell you how great it is to hear at the beginning of your podcasts that you are learning more about the Indigenous people here on Turtle Island. And just hearing you say Turtle Island almost brought me to tears the first time. Have a wonderful day. Miigwech.
Thank you so much, Denise. Oh my gosh, I loved this message. Also, thank you for giving us permission to share it on the podcast. That means a lot. And other connected yoga teachers, if you are learning about the land that you live on, we'd love to hear about that. You can share that in our show notes over at theconnectedyogateacher.com/254. I'll also link to a great website where you can look at who were the first people on the land that you're on now. It's really cool. I have some more thanks to offer to our team over here. Suzanne, thank you so much for making the audio what it is. Crunch for writing the show notes. Sinead, our community support manager. Erika, our virtual assistant. Kelly and Dixie as well. Sometimes I don't give them a shout out on the podcast, and they keep our bookkeeping and accounting organized, and that is super important over here. Another shout out to our sponsor, Offering Tree, and the entire team over there. It's so great to have you supporting our podcast and our yoga teachers. And as we close out today's episode, I'm curious, what will you be doing this week to stay connected to yourself, your yoga practice, and to your community so that you can share the yoga that lights you up?